The most disturbing part about going vegan is realizing that you've been lied to. You've been lied to by the meat industry, your family, your doctors, and most of all, you've been lying to yourself. It's frustrating to be vegan and to see the meat industry propaganda all around you. It's even more infuriating to see your loved ones continue to pay for animals to be tortured when they don't need to. Part of you may start to wonder, how do they do it? In this video, we're going through the most common lies meat eaters tell themselves. One of the top comments I see on posts about veganism is, "No one cares," and I used to think I felt the same way.
I don't care about dogs or cats at all.
Oh my gosh, he does want belly rubs.
I just don't see the difference between that thing versus any inanimate object or whatever. I guess I don't draw a distinction there.
Why did he do that? I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt him.
I convinced myself that obviously some people care about animals, like my vegan friend, and I thought it was cool that she cared about animals, but that just wasn't me. While it's true that there are some people who genuinely don't care about animals, like sociopaths, Pax Fauna's research found that meat eaters care more than they let on. Initially, they pretend they don't, but after a little digging, the psychological mechanisms they use to mask their feelings become apparent. The first technique is avoidance. Non-vegans actively try not to think about animals when they're buying meat. Most meat eaters have seen slaughterhouse footage and know that animal abuse is rampant. But when they're purchasing meat, these thoughts do not cross their minds. When I was doing debates at Harvard last fall, I spoke with a professor who refused to acknowledge that chickens were sentient. He claimed they were biological machines with no internal experience. When I gave examples that proved otherwise, he freaked out and walked away in a huff. This is called strategic ignorance, another avoidance techniques that meat eaters employ. They will literally block out information that conflicts with their desire to eat animals and intentionally underestimate the cognitive abilities of animals while refusing to look at evidence that shows otherwise. Studies on the meat paradox have also shown an avoidance of empathy. Meat eaters will dissociate meat from the living animal themselves, so there's no one to actually empathize with. This avoidance is facilitated by the way animals are bought and sold. It's not pig and cow, it's pork and beef. These real animals have become so commodified and objectified, they're not only unrecognizable, but difficult to empathize with. After avoidance comes defensiveness. Yes, I know what's happening to animals is terrible, but it's part of my culture and it's natural and it's healthy. If you've ever had a conversation about eating animals with a non-vegan, you've experienced how defensive and nasty people can turn. If meat eaters genuinely didn't care about animals, they wouldn't get defensive in the first place. Over 99% of animal products sold in the US come from factory farms, but 75% of consumers think that they're buying from humane farms. That means that 75% of people have convinced themselves that they're buying 1% of the meat supply. How is this possible? Speaking from personal experience, before I was vegan, I often talked about how horrific factory farming was, but I genuinely did not think I bought factory farmed meat because I shopped at Trader Joe's. I thought that since Trader Joe's seemed like an ethical company, they certainly wouldn't sell factory farmed meat. Looking back, I see how dumb I was, especially because I didn't only shop at Trader Joe's. I ate Popeyes, McDonald's, and Chick-fil-A. The point is that when you rarely think about animal welfare in the first place, it's easy to delude yourself when you do. The meat industry has been incredibly successful at perpetuating the humane myth, or the Santa Claus of animal farming, as I call it. It's the lie that animals have a happy life and a nice death. When you look at the packaging on these dead animals, it's easy to see why people are fooled. 58% of American adults think most farmed animals are treated well. This is why one of the most common arguments people make against veganism is, what if we gave the animals a good life? Then I think it's okay to kill them. This argument falls apart for two reasons. The first is that they don't have a good life. They're mutilated, confined, and slaughtered at a fraction of their lifespan. Even on the best farms, mutilations will occur without anesthetic, and they go to the same slaughterhouses. The second flaw in this argument is that by saying animals deserve to be treated well, you're acknowledging that they deserve moral consideration. If someone deserves to be treated well, that implies they also shouldn't be stabbed for an unnecessary reason. If we had two dogs right here, and one was horribly abused and kept in a cage, whilst the other had a wonderful life with loving companions, which dog would it be better to kill? Obviously the one who's being abused. In the same way, killing happy animals is worse than killing sad ones because they actually have something positive to live for. Animals do not care if they're labeled as free range when they're heading to the slaughterhouse. Those labels are not there for the animals, they're there for meat eaters to feel better about the unnecessary torture they create. Look, I get it. When billions of people are eating animals and you don't even know another vegan, it's easy to think that your actions don't matter. Pax Fauna found that this sense of futility was one of the biggest reasons that people don't go vegan. When I was in college, I met a couple of my degenerate friends at a bar. They were already wasted because they'd been there a few hours, so I ordered a beer to catch up. Shortly after, we wanted to go to a party, so my friend asked for the check. When it came, instead of paying for their beer, my friend got up and left. I was shocked. I didn't know they were going to do that, but instead of paying their tab, I ran out of the bar as well. I didn't want to pay the $80 that they owed, even though it would have been the right thing to do. I would have happily paid for my drink, but I knew the bar would make me pay for all of it, so I left. This attitude is called conditional cooperating, and it means you're happy to be ethical if other people are, but not if you're the only one who's willing to bear the costs. A lot of people would be fine with going vegan if everyone around them was, but they refuse to if other people don't. But let's take a closer look at this belief. Does going vegan genuinely not make a difference? The Great Pyramids of Giza are so large that astronauts can see them from space. From space, you can't tell that the pyramids are composed of stones. If one stone were removed, it would go undetected by the astronaut. But the pyramid would still be one stone smaller. Just as the pyramids are made up of stones, the market demand for food consists of many individuals' purchase decisions. It may be impossible for us to see the consequences of our purchase decisions, but that doesn't mean they're not there. To deny that vegans make a difference, you'd have to agree that every human going vegan would have no impact on farmed animal production. Obviously, that's not true. In The Meat Racket, a book about Tyson's chicken, I learned that the heads of meat companies regularly meet to forecast consumer demand, so they don't breed any animals they can't sell. Raising animals is expensive. They need land, food, water, antibiotics, torture. All those things add up. Meat companies only care about maximizing profit, and the best way to do that is to accurately forecast consumer demand using up-to-date numbers. This paper shows that vegans make a positive difference based on 3 arguments. Animal producers operate in a highly competitive environment, complex supply chains efficiently communicate information about consumer demands, and vegans have a spillover effect on the people around them. In Germany, 10% fewer animals were slaughtered in 2022 than previously because of consumer demand. In the US, it seems a little more hopeless due to the subsidies animal agriculture receives from the government, but even those don't provide the majority of profit for animal farmers. Most of their profit comes from meat eaters themselves. It may be comforting to tell yourself that your actions don't really matter, but that doesn't make it true. In 2019, I hiked the Appalachian Trail for 3 weeks, and I stayed at my vegan friend's apartment the night before hitting the trail. When the topic of veganism came up, I swiftly said, "I don't eat that much meat." When I reflected on this statement a few hours later, I realized that I was completely full of shit. While these words were coming out of my mouth, my hiking bag was filled with fish oil supplements, Slim Jims, and Spam. This experience is consistent with a study that asked people about their lifestyles and diets. They had 2 groups of students, and one group was told they were going to watch a PETA video while the control group wasn't told anything. They didn't actually watch a video, but just the threat of it was enough for the students to fudge the truth about their lifestyles. When presented with information about PETA, women reported eating 23% less meat than when they weren't confronted with information about animals. When someone finds out I'm vegan, they often say, "I don't eat that much meat." Of course, my response is, "That's great. That means it would be really easy for you to go vegan." Then they hit me with the defensiveness. A few months before I went vegan, I did the plant-based before 6 p.m. thing, and I thought I was doing such a great job. In my mind, I was basically vegan because I was doing better than everyone around me. Because the average American eats over 200 pounds of meat every year, it's easy to consume less than that and think you're doing your part. But just because you eat only a little bit doesn't mean that that animal is only a little bit dead. Every animal product comes from an animal who did not want to be exploited, and every bit causes unnecessary suffering. When someone finds out I'm vegan, this is often the first thing they say, and I said it to myself before I was vegan. Since I was already struggling with basic existence, having a full-time job, going to the gym, maintaining my relationships. I didn't want to make my life harder by going vegan. I knew there were vegans who made it work, but I believed they were fundamentally different from myself. They cared more about animals, morality, and they're probably just better at dealing with life. They must have insane self-discipline too, because there's no way I could resist the temptation of meat. All of those beliefs were ways to distance myself from vegans to avoid having to become one. It's easier to believe that you're not capable of doing the right thing than to believe you could, but you're choosing not to. I convinced myself that going vegan was expensive and I was too poor, even though the opposite is true. I told myself that I value convenience too highly and I wouldn't enjoy my food if I were vegan. The reality is that the vast majority of people could easily go vegan. It's never been more effortless than it is now. While going vegan seems psychologically daunting, the actual day-to-day is simple. You don't have to learn entirely new recipes. You just have to tweak your current shopping list. You don't have to perfectly manage your nutrition, just eat enough calories and take a multivitamin. Most people who claim going vegan is hard have never even tried. They'd rather write it off as impossible so they can keep benefiting from the exploitation of animals. I don't want this video to come off as too judgmental or to say that meat eaters are the only ones who lie to themselves, because we all lie to ourselves every day. Yesterday, I didn't want to go to the gym, so I convinced myself I was sick. The difference is that some lies harm others and some don't. Every time a meat eater convinces themselves that they can't make a difference, an animal is mutilated, tortured, and confined. It's time for meat eaters to stop pretending that there are no consequences of animal consumption and at least try to go vegan. Thanks for watching, and I'm curious what lies you used to tell yourself before you went vegan. If you want to get better at talking about veganism, check out my free vegan outreach starter guide. Special thanks to my morally superior patrons, and I'll see you next Friday.